Hello, I'm Scott Overton. This is number 0752, the Stuff File Program with Peter Anthony Holder, and it comes to you right now.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
Now, it's time for an eclectic mix of interviews and some of the oddest news stories you'll ever hear. It's the Stuff File Program with Peter Anthony Holder.
Hey there, hi there, ho there! Peter Anthony Holder here with you, and yes, this is indeed another edition of the Stuff File Program, number 0752. And coming up on this edition of the Stuff File Program, you'll meet Bart King, who is back on the show with the follow-up to his Choose Your Own Adventure book. This one is called Time Travel in 2.
So as a writer, one starts at the beginning, works through a middle, and then you work your way through the usual plot diagram to some sort of rousing conclusion. So you have a beginning, middle, and end. The difference with Choose Your Own Adventure being that you have a beginning, and then many middles, and then several endings. So you could have 20 to 40 endings in a Choose Your Own Adventure. The beauty of this for me then as a writer is that if I have an idea for a cute adventure, a funny adventure, maybe a frightening adventure, all of those can be consolidated under the auspices of this one title.
Xaysana Phavone and Melissa Phavone are brother and sister, who are part of Canada's Dodgeball team and hope to travel this August to Austria to play in the World Dodgeball Championships. How did they first come to the sport?
The first time I heard about dodgeball being a league, I got very excited about it. I joined up a league. I played with some rec teams. We eventually got to some competitive teams. And then that's when I kind of reached out to my sister about a tournament that we needed girls on. And that's when she kind of got hooked.
I've always been athletic and competitive. So I think maybe that was a big reason why he reached out to me, and they're always looking for women. So I kind of got hooked like that. And it was just fun playing with my brother and his friends. And I just kind of made my own friends along the way.
Marc Hartzman from WeirdHistorian.com is in with his monthly visit. This time around, it's the story of the world's heaviest man.
We've talked about Robert Wadlow, who was the world's tallest man ever at 8 feet and 11.5 inches. But this guy, Miles Darden, 7 feet 6 inches tall, but he weighed over 1,000 pounds. To put that in terms that I think help listeners get a good mental image of that, a more contemporary giant would be Andre the Giant. We all grew up with him, watching him wrestle. That guy was massive. Andre the Giant was like 7'4", 500 pounds. So imagine a guy a little taller than Andre and twice as heavy.
And there's lots and lots of Stuff File news and, of course, an idiot of the day. The guest slater, the person who told you this was show number 0752, was Scott Overton, author of the science fiction novel Indigent Earth. And those who remember just last week, he was also a guest on last week's show. So you can check out that appearance on show number 0751 if you want to hear it. And shame on you if you already missed it. He's also a former radio morning man, a gig that he held for 30 plus years, which led to his first novel, which is called Dead Air. And by the way, you can find links to both of those novels on this week's show, which, of course, you just heard him mention the number for, which is number 0752. See how it all goes around full circle? Thank you very much, Scott, for doing the guest slate on this edition of the Stuff File Program, a show that is listener-supported, fan-funded radio that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Well, let's get right to the stuff. On January 4th, police were called to the Market Basket supermarket in Tilton, New Hampshire, after what was described as a fruity fracas broke out in the produce section. Social media posts indicated that a watermelon had been used as an assault weapon, and that Sergeant Andrew Salmon of the Tilton Police Department confirmed that his department was investigating. Salmon said one person went to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries from being struck by a produce item. A worker who answered the phone at the Market Basket said, "We have been instructed not to say anything." The Market Basket has gone all mute. Is this the beginning of a watermelon weapon conspiracy?
You guys sure like watermelon. Want a bite? Not on your life.
The story about the Alaska Airlines plane that lost a panel while flying at 16,000 feet is all over the news, so I won't rehash that part of the story. However, at the Stuff File program, it's the little human interest stories that really capture us. For instance, when the panel flew off and the hole gaped open midair on January the 5th, someone's iPhone got sucked out and landed on a roadside in Washington state. Sean Bates, who found the phone, posted a photo on X showing the phone's intact screen and a battery life of 44% remaining. Pretty clean, no scratches on it, sitting under a bush, he posted. Jennifer Homendy of the NTSB said all found phones will be returned to their owners. Well, that's good to know, I guess. Anyway, now, I share that story because I know that some of you might be thinking, here is a phone that fell from 16,000 feet with not so much as a scratch on it, yet most of you could be in a sitting position, drop your phone a mere 3 feet, and you're left with the choices of repair or replace. Yeah, I don't get it. iPhone should be doing commercials with this guy and their phone, by the way. Anyway, speaking of iPhones, Glaus Oliveira was shopping at a North Miami Beach, Florida Target store when she set her own iPhone on a shelf. A few minutes later, she realized it was gone. She asked a store loss prevention officer if he had seen her phone. The officer said nobody had turned in a missing iPhone, but then asked weird questions such as if her password was hard or if they had Apple Pay. Oliveira went home and used her Find My iPhone app to locate her phone. It reported being at the address of 32-year-old Christopher Rodriguez, the loss prevention officer she'd spoken to. According to the arrest report, Target's surveillance video showed Rodriguez locating the phone on a shelf in aisle 5 and then switching off the phone and concealing it in his hoodie pocket. Police arrested Rodriguez for grand theft. This isn't the first time Rodriguez faced such charges. He was arrested by Coral Gables police 13 years ago and Miami-Dade police 6 years ago. You know, this tells me that Christopher Rodriguez not only sucks as a loss prevention officer, but he also sucks as a crook. Said Oliveira's son of his mom, she said it's not normal for a security guard to be a robber, a thief. Well, in that case, she's right on target. And come to think of it, maybe Target sucks at hiring loss prevention officers.
Fun made easy. That's totally Target.
Speaking of sucks, on January 2nd, West Seneca, New York police reported that the city's first crime of 2024 has been solved. The crime, a man stole 3 Shark vacuum cleaners from a Big Lots store, said the police department in an online post. After some exhaustive police work, including witness interviews, fingerprints, DNA samples, and facial recognition software, we have identified a suspect. Really? All that for 3 vacuums? Well, actually, the post went on to say, just kidding. His actual name was literally on the back of his hoodie, and we identified him in about 8 seconds and filed charges. Their post didn't offer the man's name. Again, as a criminal, he sucks. Those Shark vacuums are great, though. So they don't suck because, they do suck.
Shark Duo Clean. Invented to help you do more.
Don't try to steal one, though. Anyway, let's get to our first guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? We last spoke to Bart King back in September of 2021. For those of you keeping score, that was Stuff File program number 0630. At the time, we talked to this most prolific writer when his book, Time Travel In, first came out. Well, hold on to your hats because Time Travel In 2 has just dropped. Once again, Bart joins us via Skype from Portland, Oregon. Hi, Bart.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for being back on the program with us once again. It's always a pleasure to have you on. Now, the last time we spoke, we talked about your book, Time Travel In, which is a unique situation because it was one of those books where the reader gets to plot their own destiny, as it were, choose your own adventure series. And at the time, I mentioned the fact that I was not necessarily familiar with them, and you said that you also had not written one before. So I'm just curious to know, now that you have your sequel out, was it easier to do now that you've successfully done one previously?
So as a writer, typically a writer of fiction, one starts at the beginning, works through a middle. This is really technical writer talk, by the way, Peter. And then you work your way through the usual plot diagram to some sort of rousing conclusion. So you have a beginning, middle, and end. The difference with Choose Your Own Adventure being that you have a beginning and then many middles and then several endings. So you could have 20 to 40 endings in a Choose Your Own Adventure. And for the listeners who are familiar with it, Choose Your Own Adventure is sort of a lot of readers who grew up in the 1980s to now have seen these. Typically any middle school library, any public library will have a shelf devoted to these titles. There's dozens, hundreds even of them to choose from now because the company's been printing them for so long. But the beauty of this for me then, as a writer, back to your question, is that if I have an idea for a cute adventure, a funny adventure, maybe a frightening adventure, all of those can be consolidated under the auspices of this one title, because for Time Travel End 2, for example, I have 20 endings. So I've got 20, multiple storylines that I can resolve in different ways. And that gives me the opportunity to sort of fully express all the possibilities. It's sort of a multiverse of a book, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And the protagonist is always you. So it's the rare story where it's written in the second person. And so the opening lines typically be something like, you are, So, for example, the way this book opens is thusly, quote, thick snowflakes are falling outside the lobby of the Time Travel Inn. You are warm as you tie off one last friendship bracelet, but peering at all the white outside, you shiver, close quote. So the book continues in this fashion. And this isn't I shouldn't say normal, but it's not the typical way that books unfold. But in this case, it's been found to be sort of a gripping way to do a story, especially one where the reader is making choices as they go. So it does give the reader agency. There is a twofold choice at the end of each short chapter, which leads one to different parts of the story. You can always backtrack. If you've ever seen someone read a Choose Your Own Adventure, you see sometimes that they'll have multiple bookmarks or post-it notes in the book, or they'll simply insert their fingers to where they left off last so they can backtrack quickly and maybe choose a different path moving forward.
I'm just kind of curious because since this is a sequel to your previous book, did that cause any problems? Because let's be honest, in your previous book, you had so many different endings. So does that affect the way you begin this particular one?
Well, I have been concerned that it was impossible to write a sequel to a Choose Your Own Adventure book for just that reason. But my editor pointed out that in a number of the endings in Time Travel in 1, which wasn't called 1, just Time Travel In, the protagonist and her two sidekicks, Damien and Trent, do make it home safely and in one piece. Not in all of them, but in some of them. And given that, we could just kind of have a general reset that just starts maybe 2 weeks after the final events of the first book. The protagonist, in this case, her name's Astrid, is armed with the basic knowledge of where she is and what's happening, and you just pick it up from there. So she's, it turned out to be surprisingly easy, despite the fact that it seemed preposterous.
How soon, and again, I have not read any of these Choose Your Own Adventure books, so how soon does it fork off into various directions? Is it in chapter 1? Is it in chapter 2? Or when?
An astute question. And I'm just still overcoming my shock that you haven't read these, Peter. I mean, I'm totally joking. It happens immediately in the first chapter. And so the first chapter lays out, you have two choices. And from there, that sets a basic kind of bifurcation in the book. You can have, if you can imagine, there is a, for people familiar with the titles, there is a diagram on the back of the books that actually is a schematic of the plot diagram. It doesn't label the events, but you can see, it almost looks like a circuit board. How's that for a stirring way to get people interested? Looks like a circuit board, and you see these different branches going off. And so the first chapter, and every chapter in the book rarely exceeds maybe 6 pages, with or without illustrations. And then there's a fork in the road. And so the choice is presented at the conclusion of that opening chapter, which sort of makes the stakes clear. In any story, one could argue, and in a Choose Your Own Adventure, certainly, there is a goal or an aim or a desired outcome for the protagonist, the reader in this case. And so that could be trying to solve a mystery, or it could be trying to escape from evil henchmen who are pursuing you. There's a number of things, but there's a driving. So the opening chapter is a way to sort of introduce that driving question, that driving force of the narrative, and then from there we're off.
By the way, the last time we spoke, back in September of 2021, when I mentioned at that time that I had never read a Choose Your Own Adventure series, you were very, very quick to point out the fact that I was too old when they first came along. So, and I haven't forgotten that because, anyway, so that being said,
daggers, diversion.
Yeah. So that being said, what are the age groups, generally speaking, for a Choose Your Own Adventure series novel?
Yeah. I guess one imagines readers being in the 9 to 12 age range, 9 years old to 12-year-olds, but certainly precocious readers of a younger age, like maybe 8-year-olds read. And at events, what's interesting is when doing book events for Choose Your Own Adventure, I've had this experience now, one sees a lot of adults. And there are in fact podcasts and serious adults who they either have a fond place in their heart for Choose Your Own Adventure because of their own reading memories as children, or they're watching their own kids go through Choose Your Own Adventures and they're reading with them. They are great books for read alouds or read togethers, or they simply read the books themselves. And so the Choose Your Own Adventure company, which is the publisher is Choose Co., they have books that would qualify as YA also for Choose Your Own Adventure. So they're targeted for an older reader, like call it up to say 18, 19, 20. These have more mature themes, naturally, not preposterously so, but questions of identity and self that might not come up in a book for a younger reader. Just briefly, I had an event that I did in a store, essentially a toy store / comic book store, and Lou Ferrigno of the Incredible Hulk fame, Bill Bixby played Bruce Banner, and Lou Ferrigno played the actual Hulk in the TV series. Lou Ferrigno came in to the shop that day while I was doing I was basically at a table, for lack of a better term. And of course, people flocked to see him. And it was fascinating to see the people who came to see the Hulk, oftentimes, to my surprise, were older and their kids. And I was like, how did these kids get exposed to these TV shows? Well, through their parents, whether it's DVD sets or maybe it's streaming on platforms I'm not aware of. But that exact same demographic, then adults, maybe my age, I'm 62, almost 62, and younger, they've then come by my table and express the same sort of range of age enthusiasm for Choose Your Own Adventure books. And I was like, this is fascinating to me that adults sneak out over this. Kids are often already familiar with them. And it's really, for lack of a better term, it really warms one's heart to see that, regardless of whether it's an old TV series or a current but time-honored series of books like Choose Your Own Adventure.
I know that Time Travel in 2 is just out, but now that you've done 2, you successfully done a sequel, are you thinking of doing more?
The key element here, Peter, I suppose, as with anything, is the publisher interested in pursuing more titles with the writer. In this case, we seem to get along famously. I have an idea or two for a new original Choose Your Own Adventure. I've written enough of them now that I sort of, it takes a while to get on the wavelength of like how to organize and pace a story like these. They are unique beasts. And there are also sometimes IP, intellectual properties, that come the way of Choose Your Own Adventure. I'm thinking, for example, of Stranger Things, the TV series on Netflix. They came to Choose Co., the Choose Your Own Adventure publisher, I guess maybe a couple of years ago, and asked if they would be interested in doing a Choose Your Own Adventure for their show. So it'd be a companion book to the show. And that book has come out. It's lovely. It's really kind of an amazing project. It looks it's very much in the spirit of like a 1980s Choosing Your Own Adventure book with new material, though. For people familiar with the show will know what I mean. There's a very well curated retro feel for Stranger Things. And the book reflects that, and it's really well written too. So there may be like an IP, where I'm going with this is there might be an IP opportunity for me that I didn't foresee, but even if there isn't one, I certainly have some ideas for books of my own.
Well, speaking of retro, what was the inspiration for you to write Time Travel in the first place and the subsequent sequel?
Again, the fact that the company had seen some of my work before and thought maybe I had the right attitude, which is to say kind of a Mad Magazine for older readers, a Mad Magazine attitude, a certain irreverence, and a sense of humor that comes through in print, perhaps better than audio. And they thought, well, we should chat this guy up, basically. And so we met, we talked, I wrote some samples, and it seemed to be in the right bait. I had the right wherewithal to work for them. And so then we just started brainstorming. And, there's nothing, I have to say, like when the world is your oyster when you're composing a choose your own adventure book, because all bets are off. I had to be encouraged to come up with more and more ludicrous ideas, ludicrous in the best sense of the word, because you really can go anywhere that wherever your imagination roams, you can write it down and fold it into your adventure. And so I thought for this book, what are some preposterous thoughts that I have that I could work in here? And I thought, well, we're all familiar with the concept of the sort of the physicist's problem of Schrodinger's cat, which is the idea that this is a horrible example, I'm realizing as I started, but I'm just going to assume the listener is familiar with Schrodinger's cat. I just did a version of that, which is Schrodinger's kitten, where the kids travel to a world where all things are possible, where things are both alive and dead, where time has both no beginning and no end. And this is, it's kind of based on this physicist's mind experiment. And it actually, although I'm describing it poorly, it turned out really well. In fact, that's the cover of the book, is what we see as Schrodinger's kitchen throwing lightning bolts at our protagonists. It's kind of a fun combination of the cute, the kitten, and then the utterly existentially terrifying, which is this idea that all things can be existing once in this world.
I'm just kind of curious, when you do book signings for either this book or the previous one, do you ever get kids walking up to you thinking about different ideas that you didn't have as a potential ending?
Absolutely. Why didn't you, or you could have, are great ways for kids to lead into any meeting with an author. And I'm not even joking. Like, I love hearing that. And it just shows the level of engagement that the readers are bringing to it. And again, like who in their right mind would dream, like as a reader, if I went to an author reading, in my wildest dreams, I would never have the temerity, the impudence to walk up to them and say, well, I enjoyed your work, but did you ever think about? Because that's not the way it works. I don't have that level of interactivity with the text, right? And also it would just be bad manners for an adult like me. But kids love them. They'll just, it's like a classroom situation, right? You're really more kind of hanging out and brainstorming and chewing the fat than you are having that sort of formal relationship with a reader that you might otherwise. So the short answer to your question is absolutely, kids will come up and they've got their own ideas. And trust me, I take notes. So, and I try to give credit where it's due in the acknowledgments.
Well, congratulations on the new book. It's Time Travel Into, although I don't know why you didn't subtitle it Time Travel Into Electric Boogaloo, but that's just me. Congratulations on the book, and thank you once again, Bart, for being on the program with us.
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure. Really appreciate it.
Bart King, author of Time Travel Into. You can go to my website at thestufffile.com to the page for this show, which is show number 0752, and you'll find links to Bart's website, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order his book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
There's still more guests, more news, and an idiot of the day coming your way on the Stuff File program. Stay tuned. The Stuff File program is a listener-supported, fan-funded radio show that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Sign up and find out about our rewards program. Being a patron doesn't have to be a long-term commitment. There's absolutely no obligation. You could join today and end whenever you'd like. But the time we have your support would be so greatly appreciated. We'd also love to hear your thoughts about the show and even your ideas for rewards. Join us for the ride. Join us at patreon.com/The Stuff File program. You're listening to The Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, coming to you from Montreal, Canada, where we share the longest unprotected border in the world with the United States. Take that as a sign of extreme friendship or a warning.
And still to come on the program, we'll talk about the International Dodgeball Championships that are coming up in August. Plus, Marc Hartzman from WeirdHistorian.com is here with the weird story for the month of January. We also have an Idiot of the Day coming your way a little later on, and much more in Stuff File News right here, right now. And I have a bit of a problem with this next story. The Beanmonger, a coffee shop in Indianapolis, Indiana, next to a wedding venue site, was the site of a pop-up marriage on December 31st. With no prior notice that the happy couple and their guests were planning to converge, 20 to 30 people, including an officiant, photographer, and guests, crowded into the small store where they treated the unsuspecting workers as if they were hired staff. Said one employee, they were asking us to take coats, purses, and watch personal items as if they had rented us out. The wedding party blocked the entrance to other patrons, and when a barista asked them to move, the photographer replied, "No, wait at least 5 minutes." The store typically charges $500 for private events, which they have requested from the bride, but she deemed the amount unreasonable. Really? Unreasonable? I hope the coffee shop ends up suing this callous couple and show them the true meaning of unreasonable. I'm guessing this couple strikes everyone, myself included, as the self-centered type who, in the future, will probably end up inadvertently setting something on fire or blowing something up in an unorganized gender reveal party. Yeah. A 32-year-old woman has been arrested for assault in Boone, North Carolina. She took her aggression out on the police car's back seat on January the 2nd. Boone Police Sergeant Dennis O'Neill said a substantial amount of padding had been chewed away, adding up to $650 in damages. The department's Facebook post suggested they may need to invest in Kevlar seat covers. Authorities are still deciding whether to charge her in connection with the car's damages. Wow. If she ever suffers with nightmares, I'm wondering over time how many pillows she's ingested. J.D. Bales, a high school soccer coach in Bridgeport, Texas, has been arrested after the Wise County grand jury indicted him for an incident last fall when Bridgeport High School said it was investigating allegations of misconduct regarding the use of district funds. Bales resigned. He had allegedly used his school-issued credit card to pay his $5,455.81 bill at the Men's Club of Houston, a strip joint, when he was supposed to be attending a coaching clinic. Bales allegedly first claimed that the charge to his district credit card was fraudulent, but then eventually refunded the district for the charge. Bales, who was also a special education teacher, has been charged with felony theft. Well now, he's going to be getting a special education of his very own. Call me naive, but all I kept thinking about is, how does one spend $5,455.81 at a strip joint? I really need to see an itemized bill here. And finally, those bells signify that it's time once again for another edition of The Darwin File.
I am the Grim Reaper. I am death.
In Brazil, 71-year-old João Pimento da Silva repeatedly dreamed that gold lay underneath his very home. To that end, over a year ago, he began digging a hole in his kitchen floor that ended up being 130 feet deep and about 35 inches in diameter. But on January the 4th, Pimento's dreams died when he lost his balance and plunged to his death at the bottom of the cavity. His neighbor, Arnaldo da Silva, tried to discourage the project, but Pimenta was convinced his dream would come true. In the fall, he suffered head injuries and broken bones. Clearly, this is another case of fool's gold. And also clearly, once again, the tree of life is often self-pruning.
I have come for you.
Anyway, let's get to our next guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? There is a game that you probably haven't thought much about since elementary or high school. It's the gymnasium staple of dodgeball. Well, that school-time game is very big on the world stage. In fact, the World Dodgeball Championships will be taking place in Graz, Austria this coming August, and Canada has a team that is going. On the team are Xaysana Phavone, who is also known as Jack, and his younger sister Melissa Phavone. They are joining us via Zoom from Edmonton. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hey, Pierre, how's it going?
Just tickety-boo. Thanks very much for taking the time to be on the program with us. Now, I saw a feature that was done on the CTV News about you two guys and the sport of dodgeball, and I must confess I was not aware that there is a world championship and there's leagues involved in countries around the world. So how did you guys get into this?
Well, you're probably with the majority of people that don't know that this is a thing. So it very much started with us not knowing before that there was actually leagues. So basically, we started with just rec leagues in our own city that we heard about. The first time I heard about dodgeball being a league, I got very excited about it. And I joined up a league. I played with some rec teams. We eventually got to some competitive teams. And then that's when I kind of reached out to my sister about a tournament that we needed girls on. And that's when she kind of got hooked.
And Melissa, you're younger than your brother, right? So, and how did you get into it besides the fact that he kind of urged you into joining?
Yeah, he basically, I've always been like athletic and competitive. So I think maybe that was a big reason why he reached out to me, and they're always looking for women. So though I was at the time one of the younger players, this sport is still the same, learning the strategies. And honestly, players who are more experienced are always going to be better than young athletes. So yeah, I kind of got hooked like that. And it was just fun playing with my brother and his friends. And I just kind of made my own friends along the way.
Now, when did you get wind of the idea that it was bigger than, just the local groups or local clubs or even regional clubs to the point where you could be on Team Canada? When did that dream start to solidify?
Well, my first exposure to something outside of the city was in 2016 when one of our friends, his name was Chris Berry, he made it onto Team Canada via just a video footage. It was very small at that time. And actually 2016 was when they hosted the first kind of national tournament in Canada with all the provinces going to Toronto to play in the nationals against other provinces. So that was kind of my first exposure to knowing that dodgeball was bigger than just a rec league in the city. So they hosted tryouts in Edmonton to make the provincial team of Alberta to go play against other provinces. And I was able to make that team. And from that point on, I was basically hooked on the idea that there was more and more competitive dodgeball out there. And I kept trying to make the Team Canada since 2016. And yeah, that's when that was my first exposure to it.
And Melissa, your journey toward the national team?
Yeah, just obviously based off Jack, my older brother, bringing me into it. And then because there are women's teams and men's teams, I kind of went towards the women's team, and Edmonton had a women's team. So I made it onto that team. We've gone to nationals the last couple of years. And then it wasn't until, I knew of Team Canada because Jack made it onto the squad last 2 years ago or a year ago. And then he kind of talked me into trying out this year, and I just happened to make it as well. So that's kind of been my journey. And I feel like it's only just starting because we still have training camps and tournaments and whatnot before Worlds next year.
Okay, so there are men's teams and there are women's teams. Are there any mixed teams?
Yes.
There is a mixed team as well.
Okay. And
which we both
Sorry, go ahead.
Got asked to be on that team, but we both decided to just play men's and women's separately.
And is there a particular reason as to why you decided that route as opposed to the mixed team?
Mel, you want to go first?
It would have been fun playing with Jack, but I think we've kind of been on this journey on our own for a long time now that we wanted to see how well we could kind of succeed on our own in those divisions.
You know, I'm sure, and I spoke to Jack a little bit before we started here, and one of the things I brought up is, you know, there are two groups of the general population that don't know anything about dodgeball except the fact that it was either a fun game they played when they were in school, or it was a game where bullies seem to really proliferate, and so they have either great memories or bad memories of dodgeball. And I guess one of the things, and one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you guys is because it's not the bullying game that we all knew when we were in school. It's much more than that, correct?
No, it very much isn't so much bullying. It's really nowadays an outlet for people that want to take out some frustration, but it's also a great cardio sport because you're moving your body in so many different ways. And most people that first get into the game, they don't realize how sore they are after the first couple of games because they're using parts of their body that they just probably haven't used in a while.
And I also think it's like the sport itself has become such a community that you're not playing against people you don't know. We're playing against our friends and people we have known over the years. So I think that's the most fun is you're playing with your team who, yes, you know, and our friends, but in our league, we know everybody. So, and we play tournaments and we hang out outside of dodgeball. So that's also something that I think brings people in and keeps them. And then also, yeah, people just like the exercise as well. But I totally forgot about the kind of bullying aspect, you know, back in the day.
Right.
So that's a good thing that you brought up.
And I mean, one of the biggest things that when we first mentioned dodgeball, most people think about the movie Dodgeball, which is obviously a parody of dodgeball. But yeah, I mean, and it shows the aspects of bullying in that movie. But Dodgeball, the movie, is one of the biggest things that has brought light to dodgeball being like a sport. So as much as we hate the idea that it's a parody of the sport, it's something that's helped grow dodgeball in its entirety.
Well, I think you two are definitely helping dodgeball grow, especially considering there's a Team Canada, and we're going on an international stage with the Dodgeball Championships that are taking place in Austria in August. Now, have you guys done any play or any team play on an international level? And are there any powerhouses out there that are of concern to you? Is there any country out there that you'd like to knock off?
So first off, I just want to mention that there, in the aspect of dodgeball internationally, there's two different types of ball formats. So North America is known for playing like a foam ball. It's a 7-inch foam ball. You know, it's soft. You know, it's very light. And then a lot of times in Europe, they play with a cloth ball, which is a 7-inch rubber ball covered with a cloth material. So both Melissa and I are playing cloth, which is new to North America. And essentially, Canada, in both aspects of dodgeball, we're very strong in the foam format. We're fairly new in the cloth format, but we did place very well in the last World Tournament. For men's, the women's and mixed did okay as well, but it is a new sport for us, so we're still growing in that cloth format. So Canada, the U.S. in foam, Canada, U.S., Malaysia, those countries are essentially some of the top countries, Australia. In cloth, it's very much dominated by the UK. So basically, you know, England, Australia as well is done well in it as well. Malaysia has some strong teams as well. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out because at the last World Tournament, there was 6 different formats in the World Tournament. So there was men's, women's, and mixed in both cloth and foam.
How well has Canada done in the past?
Canada for foam, we have various gold, silver, and bronze medals. So we've been a staple in the foam format.
Women's and the mixed foam got first.
Got gold, yep.
And then the men's got
bronze foam.
Yes.
And then in cloth, we didn't place in mixed and women's, but we got 4th in the men's cloth.
Men's.
So, final question: how excited are you? And I'm sure you're very excited, but how excited are you in going to the World Dodgeball Championships in Austria in August?
Oh, very excited. I mean, there's still some work to do. We both have training camps where we have to kind of finalize. They have to finalize the rosters. So on my squad, there's 20 people, and they can only activate 12 people to go to the World Tournament. I think, Melissa, how many players do you have on your team?
We have 22 women on our squad, and once again, only 12 get activated to get chosen to go to Austria. until we know for sure, we're still, like Jack said, we still have to work hard. We're still, kind of training and kind of semi trying out for those 12 spots. And until we know for sure we're going to Austria, and I hope that both of us are going, that's when I'll be like super, super excited and super happy to actually go on the world stage and represent Canada.
Yeah, so the last World Tournament, I made the roster, but I didn't get activated to play at the World Tournament. So obviously it's very exciting to be on the roster, but until you get activated, that's where the real excitement kind of like kicks in,
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's keep our fingers crossed and hope that everything works out and you guys both make it on the team in the World Dodgeball Championships that takes place in Austria in August. How can one get more information? I understand people can go to the website, which is dodgeballcanada.org. But is there much publicity? Is there some place where this will be shown, even if it's online? How can Canadians follow along the path that the team is taking, that Team Canada is taking?
Yeah, Dodgeball Canada, and there's also the World Dodgeball Federation. They both have Instagram, Facebook, and their own websites, I believe, that they'll probably keep track of all that. Obviously, Dodgeball Canada will keep track of mostly Canada, but for some of the international tournaments that they've been playing recently have also been on there. And the World Dodgeball Federation will have things from all different countries. And there really is a lot. They're doing such a great job because it is coming from all the different countries, which there's presidents in all of them that are working together to post those things. So they're doing such a great job. And I know it's a lot. So yeah, people can kind of go on their social medias there.
One of the biggest things about people being able to watch, Twitch TV has done a really great job at basically promoting and filming a lot of our dodgeball events. So there is lots of accessible YouTube videos and Twitch videos online that they can check out and see what the tournament's like all about before the tournament happens.
Great. Well, congratulations to the two of you. And again, keep our fingers crossed for not only you being on Team Canada, but Team Canada having some great success when they go to Austria. Thank you very much, guys, for being on the program with us.
Thank you so much for reaching out to us. We appreciate it, Peter.
Yes, we appreciate it so much.
Xaysana Phavone and his sister Melissa Phavone, who are hoping to go to Graz, Austria for the World Dodgeball Championships as part of Team Canada. You can go to my website at thestuffile.com to the page for this show, which is show number 0752, and you'll find links to the Team Canada site. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
Portions of the Stuff File program are available to you via Audia.io. At Audia, you'll find hundreds and hundreds of Stuff File program interviews going all the way back to 2009. That's Audia, AUDEA.io. There's more Stuff File program coming your way right after this break.
Hello, I'm Peter Anthony Holder, host of the podcast Business Beyond Bizarre. Welcome to our second season. You'll find 10 new episodes with 20 new guests that will regale you, excite you, make you think, and hopefully make you laugh just a little. After all, as the voice lady says,
a podcast of the slightly unusual.
On this season, you'll learn about a Lithuanian potato chip company which has a flavor that is decidedly human. We'll venture into the Icelandic Phallological Museum because size matters. We'll meet a man who pushed a peanut up a mountain with his nose, the woman who runs the Sock Monkey Museum, a man who has over 2,100 pairs of Crocs, the world-famous fashion Santa, and more. It's
Business Beyond Bizarre.
Season 2. As we said last season, it's the show that might just spark you to find your own slightly bizarre path.
Business Beyond Bizarre, available wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, a show that is sanitized for your protection.
And still to come on the program, we'll talk about the world's heaviest man. Plus, we do indeed have an idiot of the day. But I've got one more Stuff File news story to get to right here, right now. A North Carolina pastor faces assault charges after he allegedly put his hands around a McDonald's employee's neck and tried to dunk his head in a deep fryer. 44-year-old manager in training LaToya Gladney called her husband, Pastor Dwayne Waden, from the fast food location in High Point, North Carolina, to complain that her co-workers were being rude to her. Waden, who also works as a part-time truck driver, arrived shortly after, went behind the counter and placed his hands around the neck of the victim, pushing his head toward the deep fryer. The alleged victim, 34-year-old Theodore Garlington, was also repeatedly punched in the face by his co-worker's husband, who did not stop until other employees pulled him off. The victim suffered injuries to his forehead and right eye, along with scratches to his neck. Waden, a pastor of Elevated Life International Ministries, was arrested for assault and battery and was released on a $1,000 bond. Waden, who runs his section of the ministry from a storefront space next to a burrito joint in Thomasville, spoke of leaving the old mentality behind and embracing the newness of life that is in front of you in a New Year's address. He went on to say, "Don't be scared of taking a chance on something new when you know the old way of doing things is not working." Meanwhile, according to McDonald's, his wife LaToya no longer works for the restaurant chain. They went on to say, "The safety and security of our employees and customers is our top priority." Yeah, restaurants don't like it when a minister comes in and tries to baptize their employee in a deep fryer. Anyway, let's get to our last guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? Marc Hartzman, the curator of WeirdHistorian.com, is back with a story for the month of January. This time around, it's the tale of Miles Darden. He was a big guy at 7.5 feet tall, but it wasn't his height that got him notoriety, it was his weight. And to tell us that story, Marc joins us via Skype from New York. Hi, Marc.
Hi, Peter. How are you?
Just tickety-boo. Happy New Year to you, sir.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
You have talked about giants in the past on this program. This time around, though, it's not a Canadian giant. It's an American one.
Yeah, and maybe the most giant of the giants. And you're right, we have talked about a few of them in the past. And we've talked about Robert Wadlow, who was the world's tallest man ever at 8 feet and 11.5 inches. And like you said, we talked about Angus McGaskill, Canadian giant. But this guy, Miles Darden, by the way, we're talking about him this month because this month marks the 167th anniversary of his death, January 23rd, 1857. So he was born in 1799 in North Carolina. And this guy, like you said, 7 feet 6 inches tall. That's huge, right? That's very tall. It's not 8 feet 11, but it's very tall. But he weighed over 1,000 pounds.
Wow.
And that's crazy. Just think about that for a second. To put that in terms that can, I think, help listeners get a good mental image of that. A more contemporary giant would be Andre the Giant, right? We all grew up with him, watching him wrestle. That guy was massive, right? Andre Giant was like 7'4", 500 pounds. So imagine a guy a little taller than Andre and twice as heavy.
And by the way, poor Andre the Giant, because when you talked about the Canadian giant, you again brought up Andre. It's like he seems to be the go-to guy as to what is large.
Yeah, well, I think it's just, it's within our lifetime, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know of anyone bigger in our lifetime than Andre the Giant. Taller maybe, but not bigger overall.
Yeah, exactly.
So he's a good example, I think. But yeah, Miles Darden, I think he's got to be probably the biggest human being who's ever been on this planet. And like the other giants, he likely had a malfunctioning pituitary gland that caused that abnormal growth. And this guy, he wasn't a wrestler or anything like that. He wasn't making money off of his feats of strength. He basically tried to just live a quiet life. He was a farmer, and eventually he opened up a tavern in an inn that was in Lexington, Tennessee. He wasn't someone who liked to, he wasn't exactly proud of his massiveness. So people couldn't actually he wouldn't step on a scale, and people couldn't just weigh him, and he would, be proud of his number. They had to fool him into finding out his weight.
And so how did they do that?
Well, of course, people were curious, right? Like, how big is this guy? So what they did, again, this was a story from 1845. So, limited technology. But they had a wagon pulled by a couple of horses, and they put really strong tension springs on this wagon. And so what they would do was they would load it up with a bunch of bags of rocks or sugar, just something heavy, like 100-pound sacks of whatever, until they could see like how far that cart lowered to the ground with those springs. So once they got what they thought was a good estimate of what Miles might be, they looked to see how close that cart got to the ground. And then when they got Miles on the vehicle, They compared it to that distance from the ground. That gave them an estimate of how much he must have weighed. So they gave him a crude measurement of just over 870 pounds.
Wow.
And then he got bigger from there, obviously.
Well,
he kept getting bigger.
Did he ever catch on to the ruse? At some point down the road, did they say, yeah, we got your weight now?
I don't know. They probably didn't want to upset him or anything. I don't think you don't want to anger a man who's 7'6" and 1,000 pounds. If he can catch you, it's not good.
Yeah, exactly. But he'd have to catch you first.
That's true. I mean, he might not be too hard to outrun, but still, I think by every account, he was actually probably a really nice guy, and a good guy in the community. So I don't think anyone wanted to upset him. But he obviously he liked to eat, as one would at that size. So his typical breakfast, just again to kind of paint a picture here, he typically ate a breakfast of a dozen eggs, 30 buttered biscuits, a gallon of water, and then 2 quarts of coffee. And you might think that that's enough to feed a few families, but he actually had to feed his own family as well. He supposedly was married at least twice. And one of those wives bared about 3 children before she passed away in 1837. And she was, this is another just crazy stat, but she was 4 feet 11 inches tall and weighed 98 pounds. So I'll let people's imaginations go wild there. But
I don't even want to think about the honeymoon night.
Exactly. It sounds a little frightening. And he has kids who were also pretty large, but obviously nowhere near like those kinds of proportions that their father had. So again, a huge guy. There's some other pretty fascinating stats about his size from history. So his coat, to make a coat for this guy, took 13.5 yards of fabric. And then once it was made, they had 3 200-pound men put it on and then walk through the town square together, showing off this giant coat. Of course, like Angus McGaskill, who demonstrated feats of strength, Darden occasionally did a similar type of thing. He was known to pull a loaded wagon out of a mud hole. Normal people couldn't make it budge at all. He could overpower a bull and just pull him backwards. Again, that's a pretty crazy feat to pull off. So it's just, again, this guy would do amazing things just with this massive size of his. But really, I think one of the most amazing things he did with that size was something he did every day, which is basically support his frame. A lot of giants don't live to be 57. 57 is a pretty good age for a giant. A lot of times because of that size, it's hard for the heart to really keep it up, and support the body. So for someone of that size to live to 57 was actually a pretty impressive feat. And he remained mobile. It wasn't like he was living a poor quality of life at the end of his at the end. So he managed till the very end, and then eventually doctors said that his cause of death was due to strangulation. The rolls of fat around his windpipe cut off his breathing. And at that point, he was placed in the casket, as you can imagine, was huge. It was 8 feet long, and supposedly it took 17 men to get him into the casket.
A casket or a piano case?
It's something like that. Some hybrid, I suppose. A huge box.
Huge.
Yes, yeah. I don't have the width, but you got to imagine that thing had to be just enormous.
And you know what people in the town must be thinking, especially as he's getting on in years, after he's, say, 50, because people like that don't live that long. Everyone is looking around at them saying, I'm not going to be his pallbearer. Are you going to be his pallbearer?
I can't do that. I'm going to hurt my back.
Yeah, exactly. No, thanks. Not interested.
Yeah, but what a sight he must have been. I mean, that's just, again, what a huge human being.
I bet I bet with his passing, his tailor was upset.
Yeah, I mean, that was, I'm sure, getting some good business. One suit was probably a month's worth of pay.
Exactly. So besides the fact that we're talking about him now, and did he have any notoriety while he was alive?
I think just, locally, I think people would, see his, what he could do. Obviously, you could see they were trying to figure out his weight, surreptitiously as much as they could. There's actually a sign posted in town that says how he was born. It's like one of those sort of markers the towns have to show like something of historical significance. So there's one of those that talks about how he was born in North Carolina in 1799 in Henderson County, and gives like a little bit of information about his life. So he is celebrated locally. So I imagine, he had to have some notoriety while alive and still retains that to this day.
Any information about his descendants of any kind?
No, I didn't come across information about his descendants, other than the fact that they were not as, I think I found a brief note saying that they weren't as huge as he was, but nothing beyond that.
Well, it's a fascinating story nonetheless. And again, as the headline says in your article on WeirdHistorian.com, the man who was twice as big as Andre the Giant. So again, we reference Andre the Giant.
Gotta love Andre.
Gotta love Andre. Marc, thank you very much for being on the program with us once again.
Thanks for having me.
Marc Hartzman, the curator of WeirdHistorian.com. He's also the author of several books, his most recent one being We Are Not Alone, The Extraordinary History of UFOs and Aliens Invading Our Hopes, Fears, and Fantasies. You can go to my website at thestufffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0752, and you'll find the link to Marc's site, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order his book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder. And boys and girls, it's that moment you've all been waiting for. It's time now for the Idiot of the Day.
And now it's time for the strange things adults do. The Stuff File presents the Idiot of the Day.
In Murray, Utah, 2 women allegedly used fake personal information to buy a 2024 Mazda CX-30 on December the 30th. They were arrested after they got greedy in return for a second vehicle 6 days after taking the first. On January the 5th, 36-year-old Laurie Nicole Willis and 33-year-old Gabrielle Marie Baker tried to purchase another vehicle. In the December 30th visit to the dealership, Willis put a false social security number on the applications, then gave the dealership a photocopy of a fake Arizona driver's license and a fake pay stub. That's when they took possession of the vehicle, worth almost $32,000. Dealer prep not included. Your mileage may vary. A few days later, employees of the dealership became suspicious because the women didn't make a down payment on time. That's when the dealer listed the Mazda as stolen. The vehicle was later recovered by police, but neither woman was driving. However, at that time, they were back at the dealership trying to purchase another vehicle. They were placed under arrest. A search of Willis turned up 3 small bags with a black tar-like substance that later field-tested as heroin. Now, why? Oh, why? If you seemingly appeared to get away with stealing a car through fraudulent documents at a car dealership, would you try the same stunt at the same dealer a mere 6 days later? One reason, and one reason only. You're an idiot!
Gee, I'm only a kid, but even I know you're an idiot.
And that's it for this edition of the Stuff File program, number 0752. Hope you enjoyed it. The website is thestufffile.com. And once again, Stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H, where you'll find information and links on all of our guests by going to the weekly Stuff File page. Just look for the corresponding program number, and once again, that's 0752. Email me at peter@thestufffile.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Spoutable, Post, Mastodon, and Blue Sky as PA Holder. Check us out on patreon.com, or you can become a patron of the program. Hope to see you back here for our next show on the air, online, or as a download. We're coming to you from everywhere, including KDXRadio.com, TrueTalkRadio.com, over the air on World FM in New Zealand, WLSLLP-FM in Dade City, Florida, KZZHLP-FM in Eureka, California, CKUW-FM in Winnipeg, CFMU in Hamilton, CKLU in Sudbury, Local 107.3 FM in St. John, CHSR in Fredericton, and also streaming on just about any streaming service your little heart desires. That's it. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, a presentation of Flying Fish Communications. Today's broadcast could be heard directly in your home, car, or wireless device, or on your computer, so you can listen on an outpatient basis. For those of you hearing this show directly inside your head, please adjust your medication.